Hello everyone and welcome back to the Misplay channel. I'm Tyler and today I'm here to showcase my Witchcrafter deck. This is a deck that originally Josh built when they first came out. He's had for a long time, didn't play them, unsleeved them, sleeved them, unsleeved them, went back and forth. And I remember saying for ages, like, if you ever move off that deck, I want to have a go at it. Like, I really like the art style. I'm really intrigued by the play style. Never really looked into it, but I was like, yeah, if you ever move off of it, I'm interested. And time rolled around. He's like, you know what? I think I am done with the deck. And I was like, cool, it's mine. I'll take it. And then shortly after, support got announced. They got a fusion. They got a fusion monster announced for them, and I was like, look, did you want it back? You can buy it back, and I'll, same price. He's like, no, you keep it. You keep it. So I now have a deck that is quickly becoming one of my favorites to play. It's such an interesting deck that previously didn't have that much interaction. You sort of just got out what you wanted and watch your opponent interact with that. But now it feels like a dance where your opponent makes a move, you make a move. Your opponent makes a move, you have a reaction. It's action and reaction now, which typically is some of the most fun decks to play as long as you can keep up. As long as you can stay with it and not forget your plays and sort of dance correctly, they become some of our favorite decks. And this deck is really fun, and I just want to showcase that. And so for those new to the Misplay channel, we run a slightly altered format, and it's a format you haven't really seen elsewhere, so it's an absolutely pure format. And what that means for us is no out of archetype in the extra deck. So my entire extra deck is 3 cards, and that's 3 copies of Witchcrafter Weissman Arm. We don't run Zeus, we don't run Appaloosa, we don't run, anything else. We want to see what that archetype can do at its purest. We run anything in the main deck that facilitates the theme or facilitates the playstyle, but we don't run hand traps. So you won't see Draw Lock Bird, you won't see Effect Veiler. If that is frustrating to you, that's fine. If you're into the meta style play, you already know what the best meta hand traps are in this format, and you can very easily alter this deck to fit that need. This is just how we play, and this is a base guideline for anyone who might be interested in the archetype that wants to know any more about it. And all of our deck builds on the channel are like this. So if you see any other videos of builds that catch your eye, all of this format. So without further ado, I'm going to start getting into it. Obviously, get it over and done with. Weissman Arm. The reason this deck is still playable is absolutely incredible. 3 effects, each of them once per turn. If a card has 3 effects, it's typically incredible. So essentially, when you or your opponent activate a spell card, or when a non-fusion spellcaster monster effect is activated, you get to pop 1 on the field, special summon a Witchcrafter from the deck, or add 1 Witchcrafter spell or trap from your graveyard to your hand. 3 good abilities. You can do each of them once per turn. She is the reason this deck is still runnable, going up against Sword Soul and Tearlaments and whatnot. She is absolutely incredible. You want to get into her first turn. You want to go first. You want to control your opponent a bit. You want to get into her as soon as possible. A backup, the old play style, and Madame Vere actually works really wonderfully alongside Weissman Arm. For those that don't know, Madame Vere, you discard a spell, negate the effects of all your opponent's monsters face up on the field. She can completely shut your opponent down if it's done at the right time. It creates a bit of a stalemate. But then you can chain Weissman Arm off that to continue playing. She used to be the only way to play, and she would just create these stalemate scenarios where neither of you are advancing the board, and it would just go on forever. But with Weissman Arm and the way I've built this deck, you just grind away your opponent and slowly get more and more ahead. A way to do that is hanging. So it's your way to essentially pop 1 on the field, discard a spell, target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it. Obviously it's not perfect because A, it targets, and B, it's destruction, but something is better than nothing. For a bit more interruption, Golem Maruru. All these are so far one-offs, as they're your best interrupters and getting ahead. Like, once you're ahead, these guys will once you've got them on the board, you'll get ahead. The rest of the monsters typically facilitate getting into these and getting to what you need to. So you don't really need to draw these, as you can special summon them from the deck, so it's just a one-off. In terms of what we run 3 of, Witchcrafter Schmader. So these all have one effect. Typically, all the smaller Witchcrafters, level 4 and lower, have 2 effects. They all have the on-field effect of tribute this card and discard a spell, special summon a different Witchcrafter from the deck. And then they'll have their own unique graveyard effect. For instance, Schmader's, if you banish her from the graveyard, you can summon Witchcrafter card from your deck to graveyard. And there's different ways to interact with cards in the graveyard. Because if you know nothing about Witchcrafter, they are solely entirely based on spells and recurring those spells. So in this build, I run 0 traps. So she is absolutely 3 of, because she's essentially a Foolish Burial, which if I could run Foolish Burial at 3, I would. If any deck could run Foolish Burial at 3, I'm pretty sure they would. We run 3 Witchcrafter Jenny, or Genny, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's Genny. Obviously, she has the normal Witchcrafter effect of you can tribute her and discard a spell to special summon another one from the deck, but her graveyard banishment effect is you banish her and banish a spell, then essentially her effect becomes that spell effect. For instance, we have a special fusion card just for Witchcrafters. If I were to use it, get out Weissman Arm, using Jenny or Genny and let's say the Hane in my hand, I could then banish Genny, banish that fusion spell card, and I can then fusion summon again. So essentially it can dodge hard once per turn effects because you're not using that effect, you're using Genny's effect. Really fun card, absolutely 3 of. Another 3 of we run is Patori. Obviously she has the on-field effect. Then for her banish effect, banish this card from your graveyard, draw a card, then summon Witchcrafter card from your hand to the graveyard. It's good, absolutely 3 of, why not? There's not too many Witchcrafter monsters in the deck, so why not run 3? And then finally, ending out at Pottery. If you banish it and you have no other Witchcrafter cards in your graveyard, target 1 in graveyard and add it to your hand. Typically, in a Witchcrafter play, you'll empty out your entire hand, even if the spells, and if you don't know about Witchcrafter, you'll see why in a moment, but this essentially just lets you recycle. That's the entire monster lineup. Obviously, if you wanted to add hand traps, you could, but I find this lineup to be the best. I don't run any Eagles. I find she's dead. I don't run more than one of these. I find they're just kind of bricky. If you can get into these when you need to. Maybe 2 Golden Roos, but sometimes she doesn't feel as useful as the others. So that is my monster lineup. Then we'll get into the spells, because as I mentioned before, 0 traps, all spells. You're very welcome to run traps. I think the trap Patronus, I think it is, very, very good. I just don't think it fits the theme. We're going to run 3 of their specific fusion spell card. Witchcrafter Confusion Confession. It allows you to fusion summon a fusion from the extra deck, using monster from your hand or field as fusion material. And the special thing about Witchcrafter spells, where if you had not used its effect this turn, during the end phase, it returns to your hand. So if I was to use Schmader's effect from before to essentially pitch it to the graveyard, during the end phase, it'll come back to my hand. It'll recur itself. So that's what makes it kind of special, because all the Witchcrafter monsters have to discard a spell to get their effects. They use discard a spell as a resource. And so typically you'll go through your entire hand and potentially you can get it all back during the end phase. So then I run 3 Witchcrafter Creation, which add 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck to your hand. It's a searcher. Obviously, if you've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for a little bit, you know that searchers are the most valuable thing. There's no reason not to run it 3. And of course, it has the Witchcraft effect of if it hasn't been used, you can add it to your hand during the end phase. I run a singular Witchcrafter Holiday, which is essentially the in-archetype monster reborn, with of course the end of turn effect. Unveiling, special summons from the hand. Draping, target spells and traps your opponent controls, up to the number of Witchcrafter cards in your hand, and then return to them. Up to the number of Witchcrafter cards you control, and then return your opponent's spells or traps to the hand. I run it at 1. You could go down to 0 if you just want to run 10 Twisters or Lightning Storm or whatever. I just like it as discard fodder. I then run a single Scroll and a single Buy Street. Now, these are a bit different. These are continuous spells. They have a few effects, but being continuous spells, you typically only want run one. Witchcrafter Buy Street. First time each Witchcrafter you control will be destroyed each turn. It is not, which is just great protection because they don't have any other protection for themselves. If a Witchcrafter would discard a spell to use its effect, you can send this to the graveyard instead. Just essentially it's protection, then you can send it to the graveyard instead of discarding, and of course it'll come back on the field during the end phase if you have not used effect. Witchcrafter Scroll is a bit worse, and I've considered cutting it, but I do like it overall. If one of your Witchcrafters destroys a monster by battle, draw a card, and then if you would activate monster's effect, discard 1 spell, you can send this one instead. So it essentially does, ideally, get a monster on the field, get these 2. You can use these as the materials if you want to keep the stuff in your hand, which can be very useful if you've got these heavy cards in your hand that you want to use. Don't run more than 1, kind of bricky. If you want to, you could easily cut this and go to 2 of this, or cut this and this entirely if you wanted to switch it up. That's the lineup of Witchcrafter spells. I run a lot of essentially facilitators out of the archetype, but just fit the theme really well. So one I really like is Magician's Restage. Magician's Restage is an alright card normally, but in this deck it runs really well. So another continuous spell, target 1 level 3 or lower Witchcraft in your graveyard, special summon it. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Magician's continuous spell from your deck to your hand. Now, I've already got the Witchcrafter Monster Reborn. You think, why would I need Restage? Well, it's actually the secondary effect that I really like, is that when it goes to the graveyard, you can add a different Magician's continuous spell from your deck to your hand. So I can get Magician's Right Hand or Magician's Left. Now, if you don't know what these are, essentially, the first time your opponent would activate a spell or effect while you control a Witchcrafter, it's negated and destroyed, and this is the same for traps. So essentially, let's say I have Pottery on the field, normal summon her, activate her effect, tribute her, and send a Restage from my hand to the graveyard. I can now understand what I'm going against. If a deck that loves spells more or loves traps more, I can pick or choose which one to search, essentially. It's a free search. It's so good. If I'm going up against Eldritch, obviously I'll get the trap one, or Altergeist, or whatever, Labyrinth, or whatever you need, right? If I'm going up against a spell-heavy deck, I can use this. The fact that I can use Restage to very easily search one of these while not stopping my plays at all, incredible. Absolutely love it. I find it's a really fun tech card in this deck, as I don't have that many I don't have Omni Negates, right? And I've only got the monster effect negate with Madame Vere, so I need to find other ways to stop my opponent playing, and this is a little fun one. I run a singular Magicalized Fusion, just another way to me to fuse, because sometimes, especially early on, I found it was a little difficult to get into Weissman Arm, but this just helps. Banish fusion monsters from the field or the graveyard to fusion summon. If I can then use the plays, get him into the graveyard, then use this, it just allows me to just have a good time, essentially. I run 1 Reasoning, which is absolutely pivotal tech card in this deck. Your opponent calls a monster level between 1 and 12. Excavate the cards from your top of your deck until you see a monster with a level. And essentially, if your opponent guessed it, the monster goes to graveyard. If they didn't guess it, it's special summoned. Now, in a lot of decks, it's kind of average. There's a reason it's limited to 1, because some decks can abuse it. This deck could abuse it very well, because I can just load up my graveyard with spell cards. Be it Witchcrafter ones to come back, or be it Restage, or like, think about the 12 cards I showed you before. If I get all those in, I'm so far ahead of my opponent in terms of hand advantage, it's crazy. If I could run 3, I'd run 3. I then run the incredible Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial is at 1, Foolish Burial Goods is at 3. I can just send cards from deck to the graveyard if I need to do this to search this. If I need to do that with any of my other Witchcrafter cards to get into the next turn, absolutely will. 3 of. Some of the best discard fodder in the game in Metal Foes Fusion. Some people use it in Sky Striker as well, but just cool. This discard Metal Foes Fusion. I can then activate that effect to draw one. Just facilitates the playstyle so well, where I'm just dancing. I'm just constantly doing things. Anytime I have a discard that allows me to keep playing and use that card, it's incredible. Love Metal Foes Fusion in this deck. That is all the facilitators and stuff that helps the playstyle. I then just run 3 staples, which you can easily take in, take out, do whatever you need. Foolish Burial, Raigeki, Cosmic Cyclone. You could very easily do 2 Lightning Storms and keep the Foolish Burial, or make it into whatever you need it to. But that rounds out 40. 40 of such a really unique, such a really fun deck that has a very fun play style that you get to dance with. Will this tear down the meta? Absolutely not. But is it a fun deck you can play around with? Is it a fun deck that you might be able to explore or find a really cool combo with? I've made this deck my own with the build, and I'd love to see what you guys do with yours. If you're interested in this deck at all, I highly recommend picking it up. It's been one of my favorite recent additions, and I absolutely adore it. If you've liked this video, please like it, comment, share, thumbs up, whatever YouTube is doing to videos right now. Please tell your friends, tell your friends' friends, tell your friends' friends. We love making content, and we love seeing what you guys comment, seeing what you want, just seeing the channel get subs. We absolutely adore it. If you've liked any of our stuff, we have a lot of other videos out, and always more videos going out consistently, weekly. Thank you very much, guys. Bye.